It's 15,000 years ago. You're a hunter-gatherer somewhere in Eurasia. Your life is basically wake up, try not to die, find food, try not to die again, sleep. Every single day. And one night around your fire in the middle of nowhere, you hear something rustling in the darkness just beyond the light. You freeze. And then a pair of yellow eyes blinks at you from the shadows. Now. Most animals at this point would either run away or eat your face, but this one doesn't. It just sits there, watching you, and something about it makes you not throw your spear at it. That moment is probably where the entire story of dogs begins. And here's the thing. The story of how wolves became dogs is one of the most bizarre, fascinating, and honestly kind of hilarious chapters in all of natural history, because it didn't happen the way most people think. Humans didn't exactly plan it. There was no ancient guy who said, you know what, I'm going to domesticate an apex predator and turn it into a creature that sleeps on my pillow and cries when I leave the room for 30 seconds. No, it was way more chaotic than that. First, let's establish something important. Dogs are not a separate species that existed naturally in the wild. They are, biologically speaking, a domesticated subspecies of the gray wolf, Canis lupus familiaris. Every single dog that has ever existed, from the terrifying German Shepherd to the embarrassingly small Chihuahua, is descended from wolves. Which means at some point, wolves and humans had a conversation that went very, very differently than it should have. But when exactly did this happen? Scientists have been fighting about this for decades, and honestly, they're still fighting. The current best estimate puts the domestication of dogs somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago. That's a huge range, and the reason it's so wide is because the archaeological record is messy. DNA doesn't lie, but it does get confusing, and ancient bones don't come with timestamps. What we do know is this. Dogs were the first domesticated animal. Not cows, not horses, not goats. Dogs, by a massive margin. Horses weren't domesticated until about 6,000 years ago. Dogs were already man's best friend when humans were still thousands of years away from inventing farming. This wasn't a planned agricultural decision. This was something that happened deep in the Stone Age, probably multiple times, in multiple places, before humans had even figured out how bread worked. Which raises the obvious question. How? Here's where it gets really interesting, and where the old romantic idea of dog domestication completely falls apart. The classic story goes like this. A brave prehistoric human finds a litter of wolf pups. He takes them home. He raises them. He trains them. He creates loyal hunting companions. Beautiful, heartwarming, completely not how it happened, because here's what nobody tells you about wolves. They are not domesticable as adults. You can raise a wolf pup from birth, give it love and food and a warm place to sleep, and it will still be fundamentally biologically a wolf. It will still have wolf instincts. It will still be dangerous. It will still want to do wolf things. Zoos have known this for centuries. Wildlife sanctuaries know this. The idea that some ancient human just decided to tame wolves through sheer force of will is the kind of thinking that gets people bitten. So if humans didn't intentionally domesticate wolves, what actually happened? The leading theory right now, the one that has the most scientific support and also happens to make the most sense, is that wolves domesticated themselves. Read that again. The wolves chose this. Sort of. Here's how it worked. As humans became better at hunting, they started generating something that no other predator in the ecosystem was producing at scale. Consistent, reliable garbage. Leftover bones. Discarded scraps. Animal parts they didn't eat. And when you're an opportunistic scavenger like a wolf, that is basically the equivalent of a Michelin star restaurant opening up in your neighborhood. So some wolves, not all wolves, just some of them, started hanging around human camps, staying close, waiting for scraps. And the key thing here is which wolves were doing this. It wasn't the big, dominant, aggressive ones. Those wolves wanted nothing to do with humans. The wolves that started edging closer to the fires were the ones that were slightly less afraid, slightly more curious, slightly calmer around the terrifying, fire-wielding, spear-throwing creatures that were apparently just going to throw bones at them anyway. And those wolves got fed. and the more aggressive ones who kept their distance had a harder time finding food and had fewer offspring. Over generations, many, many generations, this created a pressure that nobody planned for and nobody engineered. The wolves closest to human camps were, by definition, the ones with the lowest stress response around humans, the calmest, the friendliest, the most likely to approach instead of flee. And their puppies inherited those tendencies. And their puppies did too. Natural selection, operating entirely without human intention, started nudging wolf behavior in a very specific direction, toward us. Now, here's where something genuinely bizarre happens. Something that scientists didn't fully understand until a Russian geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev ran what might be the most fascinating and underrated experiment of the 20th century. In the 1950s, Belyaev was working in Soviet Russia, which means he was doing science under conditions that could generously be described as stressful. Genetics was considered a bourgeois pseudoscience by Soviet authorities at the time, which is a sentence that requires a moment to fully absorb. But Belyaev, who was genuinely brilliant, found a way to keep doing his research under the cover of studying fox breeding for the fur industry. What he actually did was start selectively breeding silver foxes, and the only trait he selected for, the only one, was tameness. Every generation, he tested all the foxes for how they responded to humans, and only bred the ones that showed the least fear and aggression. That's it. No other selection criteria. What happened next was extraordinary. Within just a few generations, we're talking decades, not millennia, something very strange started happening to the foxes. They didn't just become friendlier, they started changing physically. Their ears became floppy, their tails started to curl, their coats developed patches of white and brown instead of solid silver. Their faces got rounder, their skulls changed shape, their reproductive cycles shifted. They started barking differently. They started seeking human attention and making eye contact. They started acting like dogs. Nobody told them to do this. Belyaev hadn't selected for any of these physical traits. He'd only selected for tameness. But somehow, selecting for one behavioral trait had unlocked a cascade of physical and behavioral changes that transformed the foxes into something that looked and acted weirdly, uncannily familiar. What Belyaev had stumbled onto, and what scientists are still working out the full details of today, is something called domestication syndrome. The idea that certain genetic pathways for tameness and low stress response are linked, on a deep biological level, to a whole suite of other physical and developmental traits. When you breed for friendliness, you get floppy ears as a bonus. When you select for calm behavior, you get spotted coats you didn't ask for. The package deal of domestication is weirder and more complex than anyone expected. And crucially, this experiment showed that it doesn't take thousands of years. With strong selection pressure, the fundamental character of a species can shift dramatically in just a handful of generations. Which means the wolves hanging around ancient human camps might have started showing dog-like traits faster than anyone previously thought. But here's the question nobody seems to ask loudly enough. What did the humans do when the wolves started getting friendlier? Because this is a two-way street. The wolves changed, yes. But human behavior had to change too. At some point, some ancient person had to not throw their spear at the wolf sitting near the fire. They had to decide, consciously or not, that this creature was tolerable. Maybe useful, maybe something else entirely. And the evidence suggests this happened differently in different places. There's strong genetic evidence that dogs were domesticated more than once, in more than one location. East Asia, the Middle East, and possibly Europe all have genetic signatures suggesting independent domestication events, which means the meeting between wolves and humans wasn't a single magical moment. It was a pattern, a repeated tendency for these two species to find each other useful. And once humans figured out that a semi-tamed wolf could actually be incredibly useful, warning them when other predators approached, helping track prey, acting as a living alarm system, the relationship accelerated. Now there was active pressure from the human side to keep the friendly ones, to feed them more, to let them sleep inside, to, in some small way, begin actively selecting for the traits they preferred. The wolves that liked humans survived better in human company. The humans that kept wolves survived better in the wilderness. A co-evolutionary partnership formed, not because anyone planned it, but because it worked spectacularly for both sides. Now let's talk about what domestication actually does to a brain. Because dogs are not just wolves that learned to be polite. They are cognitively different from wolves in ways that are genuinely remarkable. One of the most striking differences is how dogs interact with human gestures. If you point at something, a dog will look where you're pointing. A wolf won't. Even wolf pups raised by humans from birth, socialized intensively, won't reliably follow a pointing gesture. But a domestic dog puppy, even one that has had minimal human contact, will look where you point. This is not a learned behavior. It's genetic. Dogs have been shaped over thousands of generations to read human communicative cues in a way that no other animal can match. Dogs make eye contact with humans in a way that their wolf ancestors never would. In wolf society, direct eye contact is a dominance challenge. It means a fight is coming, but dogs evolved to hold your gaze, to look to you for information, to treat human faces as sources of meaning. And when a dog looks into your eyes, both your brains release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the same hormone released between a mother and her infant. You are literally chemically bonding with your dog when you make eye contact with them, and they are bonding with you. In one of evolution's stranger plot twists, a carnivore that should by all rights want to eat us has been biologically rewired to love us. Dogs also have a unique muscle, a tiny facial muscle above their eyebrows, that wolves don't have. It's called the levator anguli oculi medialis. When a dog uses it, it makes their face look sad, soft, and unbearably cute. Puppyish. It's the muscle responsible for the puppy dog eyes expression, and it appears to have been directly selected for over thousands of years of domestication because it works on humans. It makes us want to take care of them. It makes us feel responsible for their well-being. The dog unknowingly evolved a biological hack for manipulating human emotions, and it is spectacularly effective. You thought you were choosing your dog. Your dog's ancestors spent 10,000 years evolving to make you want to choose them. By around 10,000 years ago, when humans were just starting to figure out agriculture and settle into permanent villages, dogs were already deeply embedded in human society. We know this because dogs start appearing in burials from this period. Human graves containing human bones also contain dog bones, not as food, as companions. Some of the oldest confirmed human-dog burials have the dog arranged carefully beside the human, sometimes with a human hand resting on the animal's body. These were people who had lived alongside dogs and wanted them present in death as in life. Think about what that means for a moment. The very first domestic relationship in human history was one of genuine companionship, not purely utility, not just a working animal, something that crossed the line into what we might actually recognize as love. In a world of constant physical hardship, brutal survival conditions, and a life expectancy that makes a modern person's eyes water, humans were spending emotional energy on their dogs, grieving them, burying them with ceremony. This is one of the oldest impulses we have evidence of, and it's still going on. Right now, somewhere, someone is spending money they probably shouldn't on a ridiculous tiny coat for their ridiculous tiny dog and feeling completely fine about it. The emotional logic has not changed in 15,000 years. So what came next? Because wolf learns to tolerate humans, gets fed scraps, becomes slightly less wolfy, is only the beginning of the story. What follows is one of the most dramatic transformations in the history of life on Earth. After that initial domestication, humans took the wheel. The natural pressure that had started the process, select for tameness, get dogs, was replaced by something much more directed, human intentional breeding. And humans turned out to be absolutely wild about variety. Over the next several thousand years, humans bred dogs for specific jobs. Hunting dogs, herding dogs, guard dogs, sled dogs, war dogs, lap dogs for aristocrats who apparently had a lot of time on their hands. Different sizes, different shapes, different temperaments, different instincts. The genetic variation locked inside the dog genome was exploited to produce a range of body types and behavioral profiles, unlike anything else in the animal kingdom. The speed of this diversification is astonishing. In roughly 15,000 years, which is basically nothing in evolutionary time, humans produced everything from the Great Dane to the Dachshund. From the greyhound, built for pure speed, to the bulldog, which is shaped like a very sad loaf of bread and somehow still finds the energy to be a personality. The wolf body plan, sleek and functional and honed by millions of years of natural selection, was essentially taken apart and reassembled into hundreds of different configurations, each one reflecting a specific human need, preference, or at some point apparently just a whim. Modern dog breeds as we know them are actually very recent. Most of the breeds that exist today were formally defined in the 19th century during a period of intense interest in controlled breeding that produced what were called breed standards. Precise specifications for how a dog of a given breed should look and act. This is when dog breeding went from, "I want a dog that's good at hunting," to something considerably more baroque. The Victorian era took the 10,000-year project of dog domestication and turned it into a competitive sport. Which brings us, inevitably, to the modern moment, and to the strange relationship we have now with these animals. Because dogs today occupy a position in human society that no other animal comes close to. They live inside our homes, they sleep in our beds, they appear in our wills. There are dogs with their own Instagram accounts, their own merchandise lines, their own birthday parties. There is a dog currently somewhere in the world with a better quality of life than most humans in recorded history, and it doesn't know this and it doesn't care because it just found a sock on the floor, and the sock is incredibly interesting. We spend more money on pet care than most countries spend on education. We develop genuine grief when our dogs die. Grief that neurologically and emotionally resembles grief for human family members, because as far as our brains are concerned, that's more or less what they are. We make medical decisions for dogs that we sometimes won't make for ourselves. We train them, talk to them, apologize to them, ask them how their day was, even though we know they can't answer and somehow feel like they understand anyway. None of this was planned, none of it was intended. A wolf started eating garbage near a fire, got slightly less scared than its siblings, had puppies that were slightly less scared than average, and 15,000 years later, someone is paying $40 for artisanal, grain-free, salmon-based dog food. Evolution is patient, and it is hilarious. But here's the part I want to leave you with, because I think it's the genuinely extraordinary thing about this whole story. In virtually every other case of animal domestication, humans were clearly in charge. We captured animals, we penned them, we bred them specifically for our own purposes, their meat, their milk, their labor, their hides. The relationship was largely one-directional. We needed something. They provided it involuntarily. Dogs are different. Dogs were, from the very beginning, participants in their own domestication. They approached us. They adapted to us. Their brains changed to understand us in ways that remain unique in the entire animal kingdom. And we, in turn, adapted to them, neurologically, emotionally, culturally. We changed too. Researchers have found that human populations that had dogs performed better in certain survival contexts. Dogs gave warnings. Dogs helped on hunts. Dogs may have contributed to the success of human expansion into new environments. There is a genuine argument, not a fringe argument, a serious scientific one, that the domestication of dogs was a significant factor in human success as a species. That without dogs, the trajectory of human civilization could have been measurably different. We didn't just create dogs. In some meaningful sense, dogs helped create us. That wolf that crept toward the firelight 15,000 years ago, looking for scraps, wasn't just making a strategic decision about food. It was, in the very slow and unconscious way that evolution works, beginning a partnership that would outlast every empire, every language, every civilization that has risen and fallen in the time since. A partnership that, against all biological logic, turned two very different creatures into something that feels, to both of them, something like family. And the next time your dog falls asleep on your feet, or stares at you with that absurd yearning expression while you eat dinner, or loses its mind with joy at the sound of your keys in the door. Just remember, that is 15,000 years of mutual evolution expressing itself. That happiness is ancient. That bond was built slowly, accidentally, and at enormous cost to the rational decision-making of wolves everywhere. It was worth it for them. And honestly, it was worth it for us too.